The night air over the Crimson Moon Kingdom was cold and still when Elena Voss stood before the gathered packs, waiting for the words that would decide her future. Torches burned along the stone walls of the ceremony grounds, and hundreds of wolves, both in human form and shifted, watched in silence. This was the night of the mating ceremony, when the bond between true mates was revealed before the eyes of the kingdom. Elena had never expected to be chosen. She was an Omega from a small, unimportant pack at the edge of the territory, a young woman who worked quietly in the healing tents and rarely spoke unless spoken to. She did not dream of crowns or thrones. She only hoped, like every wolf her age, to find someone who would look at her and see something worth keeping. When Alpha King Draven Ashford stepped forward, the crowd fell into a hush so deep that Elena could hear her own heartbeat. He was tall and commanding, with the kind of presence that made lesser wolves lower their eyes without being told. His golden eyes swept across the crowd until they landed on her, and something shifted in the air. She felt it too, a pull deep in her chest, warm and undeniable. Her wolf recognized him instantly. He was her mate. For one breathless moment, she thought he might smile. Instead, his jaw tightened, and something like anger flickered behind his eyes. "No," he said, his voice carrying across the silent grounds. "This bond means nothing to me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Rejecting a true mate was rare, almost unheard of, for it was considered an insult to the moon goddess herself. But Draven did not care about tradition that night. He cared about power. "I am uniting the 5 packs," he continued, his voice cold and steady. "My marriage to Lady Seraphina Cole of the Iron Fang pack will secure that unity. I will not throw away the future of this kingdom for a bond I never asked for." Elena stood frozen, her cheeks burning with humiliation as hundreds of eyes turned to stare at her. She could have cried. She could have begged him to reconsider, as some rejected mates did, falling to their knees in front of the whole kingdom. But something inside her refused to break in front of him. She lifted her chin instead, met his gaze one final time, and said nothing at all. "So be it," she whispered, so quietly that only she could hear it. Then she turned and walked away, her steps steady, despite the trembling in her hands, leaving the ceremony grounds behind her. The weeks that followed were quiet ones. Elena returned to her home pack, back to the small stone cottage where she had grown up, back to the herbs and bandages of the healing tent. She told no one the full truth of what had happened, though rumors traveled fast between packs, and soon everyone knew that the Alpha King had rejected his own true mate to marry for power instead. Some pitied her. Others thought her foolish for not fighting to keep him. But Elena felt something different growing inside her. Something she could not yet name. It was not anger, though she had every reason to be angry. It was something steadier, quieter, like a seed pushing up through cold soil. One evening, while cleaning out her late grandmother's belongings, she found an old leather journal tucked beneath a loose floorboard. The pages were yellowed and fragile, filled with handwriting so faded she had to hold it close to the candlelight to read it. It was her grandmother's account of their family's history, and what Elena read there made her hands shake. Her family was not simply a minor line from a small pack, as she had always believed. They were descendants of the last Supreme Luna, a title so ancient that most wolves believed it to be nothing more than legend. The Supreme Luna was said to be chosen directly by the moon goddess, not born of political marriages or pack alliances, but marked by divine will to guide all packs as one. The line had gone quiet for generations, hidden away after a war that nearly destroyed the old order, its descendants scattered and forgotten to protect them from those who might use their blood for power. Elena read the journal late into the night, her heart pounding with disbelief. Could it be true? Was she truly connected to a bloodline older and more powerful than the Alpha King's own crown? She did not know what to do with this knowledge. She was no warrior, no politician, no one trained to rule. But she could not ignore what she had read, and slowly, quietly, she began to study the old ways her grandmother had written about, the rituals and traditions of a Luna, chosen by the goddess herself, long before Alpha Kings ruled through strength and bloodlines alone. Meanwhile, in the capital, Draven's life was not going as smoothly as he had planned. His marriage to Seraphina had strengthened his political standing, just as he had hoped. The Iron Fang pack now stood firmly behind him, and the unity he sought seemed closer than ever. But something else had changed, something he could not explain to anyone, not even himself. His strength was fading. At first, it was small things. He grew tired more easily during training. His senses, once sharp enough to hear a whisper from across a room, felt dulled somehow, as though a fog had settled over him. During the full moon rituals, when alphas were meant to draw strength directly from the goddess, he felt nothing at all, only a strange emptiness where power used to be. He told no one, of course. An alpha king could not appear weak, not when he had worked so hard to build his position. But privately, in the quiet hours of the night, he began to wonder if rejecting his mate had cost him more than he realized. The old stories spoke of consequences for those who denied the bond the goddess herself had woven. He had always dismissed such stories as superstition. Now he was not so sure. Seraphina noticed the change in him, though she said nothing directly. She was not a foolish woman. She had married Draven for the alliance it brought her pack, not for love, and she watched him now with a careful, calculating eye. If the Alpha King was losing his strength, she needed to understand why, and what it might mean for her own position. Months passed. Tensions between the 5 packs, which Draven's marriage was supposed to ease, began to resurface instead. Old rivalries stirred. Alphas who had once respected Draven's strength now whispered among themselves about his sudden weakness during gatherings, wondering if the great Alpha King was truly as powerful as he claimed to be. It was during this time of growing unrest that an old prophecy resurfaced, one that had not been spoken aloud in generations. The elders of the kingdom, sensing the instability rising among the packs, gathered to consult the ancient texts, searching for guidance. What they found unsettled even the most composed among them. The prophecy spoke of a blood moon, a rare celestial event that would occur only once every 100 years, during which the moon goddess herself would reveal the true ruler of the kingdom, not through bloodline, not through conquest, but through her own divine choice. The prophecy warned that any alpha who ruled through power alone, without the goddess's blessing, would eventually find his strength hollow, his crown built on unstable ground. The blood moon was only weeks away. Word of the prophecy spread quickly, and for the first time, Draven felt a genuine flicker of fear. He had built his entire rule on strength and strategic alliances, dismissing the old ways as outdated traditions with no real power behind them. But if the prophecy was true, if the goddess truly intended to choose a new ruler, everything he had sacrificed, everything he had rejected, might have been for nothing. Elena too heard of the approaching blood moon, and something in her grandmother's journal suddenly made sense. The last passages spoke of a night when the goddess's chosen would be revealed, marked by a light only the goddess herself could summon. Elena did not know if she was meant to be part of this prophecy, but she felt, for the first time in her life, that she needed to be present when it happened. She traveled to the capital in secret, telling no one of her true purpose, and found lodging near the ceremony grounds where the blood moon gathering would take place. She told herself she only wanted to witness history, to see whether the old stories her grandmother had written were true. But deep inside, she wondered if fate had brought her back to this place for a reason. The night of the blood moon arrived with an eerie stillness. The sky turned a deep, unsettling red as the moon rose over the ceremony grounds, and every pack in the kingdom gathered to witness whatever the goddess intended to reveal. Draven stood at the center, dressed in his finest robes, projecting a confidence he no longer fully felt. Seraphina stood beside him, watching the crowd with sharp, careful eyes. Elena stood near the back, hidden among the gathered wolves, her heart pounding as the ceremony began. The elders spoke ancient words, invoking the goddess's presence, and for a long moment, nothing happened. The crowd held its breath. Then the light began. It started as a soft glow, barely noticeable at first, rising from somewhere within the crowd, rather than from the sky above. Wolves turned, murmuring in confusion, trying to find its source. The glow grew brighter, warmer, unmistakably alive, and it was coming from Elena. She felt it before she understood it. A warmth spreading through her chest, gentle but overwhelming, as though something ancient and kind had finally found what it had been searching for. She did not fight it. She simply stood still and let it happen, tears slipping down her cheeks as the light surrounded her, marking her before the eyes of every pack in the kingdom. The crowd began to kneel. It started with those closest to her, wolves who felt an undeniable pull toward the light. an instinct older than any political loyalty. Then it spread outward, pack by pack, until nearly everyone present had lowered themselves to the ground, recognizing without words what had just occurred. The moon goddess had chosen her supreme Luna, and it was not the woman standing beside the Alpha King. Draven watched in stunned silence as the crowd turned away from him, kneeling instead to the very woman he had rejected months before. His mind raced, searching for some way to reclaim control of the moment, but he found none. This was not a political maneuver he could outmaneuver, not an alliance he could negotiate. This was the will of the goddess herself, undeniable and absolute. Seraphina, standing beside him, understood immediately what this meant. She had married Draven for power and position, not out of love, and she was not foolish enough to stand against a goddess-chosen Luna. Quietly, without any dramatic declaration, she stepped back from Draven's side, distancing herself from a position that no longer held the security she had sought. Elena walked forward slowly, the glow around her fading as the ceremony settled into a stunned, reverent silence. She did not look at Draven with anger or triumph. She simply looked at him with a quiet, steady calm, the same calm she had shown on the night he rejected her. "I did not ask for this," she said softly, her voice carrying easily through the silent crowd. "I only wanted to understand who I was. But if the goddess has chosen me to guide this kingdom, then I will not turn away from that responsibility." Draven said nothing. What could he say? He had spent months building his power through strategy and sacrifice, only to watch it dissolve in a single night, replaced by something he could never have planned for or controlled. His wolf, weakened for so long, finally understood what his mind had refused to accept. He had rejected not just a woman, but a bond the universe itself had woven for him, and no amount of political maneuvering could undo that mistake. The following weeks brought great change to the Crimson Moon Kingdom. Elena was formally crowned as Supreme Luna, a title that carried authority beyond anything an Alpha King could claim alone. The five packs, once divided by rivalry and uncertain alliances, found unity not through forced marriages or political strategy, but through shared reverence for the goddess's chosen leader. Elena ruled with the same quiet steadiness she had always carried, listening carefully to every pack's concerns, healing old wounds between rival alphas, and slowly building a kingdom that felt more balanced than it ever had under strength alone. Draven remained Alpha King in name, but his authority was forever changed. He watched from the edges of gatherings now, no longer the center of every decision, no longer the most powerful presence in any room he entered. He had chosen power over love once, believing the two could never coexist, only to learn too late that true power, the kind the goddess herself recognized, could never be built on rejection and pride alone. On quiet evenings, he sometimes found himself remembering that night at the mating ceremony, wondering how different his life might have been had he simply reached for the bond instead of pushing it away. But some choices, once made, could not be undone, and Elena had moved forward into the role she was always meant to hold, no longer waiting for a place beside him, but standing firmly on her own. The kingdom prospered under her guidance, and slowly, the story of the rejected mate who became Supreme Luna spread far beyond the Crimson Moon territory, told in every pack as a reminder that fate could not be outrun, no matter how much power one believed they held. And Elena, who had once stood humiliated before the entire kingdom, now stood as its most respected leader, proof that the goddess's will was patient, but never forgotten.